Well, hey guys, this is Senior Moments, and I'm Tommy Ellison, and thank you for tuning in. We are live at 5. I thought that would be a really cool name, but unfortunately, there's about 4,700 news stations that probably have early dibs on it. So I just call this little podcast of mine Senior Moments, and it's all about a 73-year-old who can't remember where his car keys are, but yet I can, for some reason, remember why and what I was doing 30, 40, 50, maybe even 60 years ago. And today is certainly no exception to that. The title of today's podcast, which is number 5, by the way, is the 49th Street Gang. And it's really not about so much a gang as we think of them today. It was just all the kids that hung out, pretty much on 49th Street, which for those of you who don't know me, I grew up in a little town called Fairfield. It was a steel-making town. It was adjacent to Birmingham, and it was a kind of a closed community. In fact, Fairfield was a planned community, and the Tennessee Coal and Iron and the U.S. Steel Corporation actually created the town. You can look it up on Wikipedia. It was originally called Corey, who was named after one of the presidents of the steel company up in Pittsburgh. And then he got involved in a little bit of a scandal, I think, with a secretary, if I read it correctly, and they changed the name of the town from Corey to Fairfield. But it's where I grew up. It's where my mom worked for 40 years at the credit union. My dad was a police officer there for a short time and then eventually went to work for the county. And so growing up in a little town like Fairfield was a special, unique opportunity because everybody really knew everybody. My grandmother, she lived on 49th Street. She raised 10 kids with her husband, Steve. He was the first fireman, the founder, rather, of the first fire department in Fairfield. And, it was a tight-knit little community. And like I say, everybody knew everybody. And, of course, everybody knew everybody on the street that she lived. And I spent a lot of time there after school and during summer because my mom worked, got off at 5 o'clock. And so between those daylight hours during the summer, I would always spend it there at my grandmother's house on 49th Street. So that's kind of the backstory of where all this took place. And there were a bunch of guys that grew up on 49th Street. Some of them became rather famous. Some of them became rather infamous. In fact, I remember there was one guy that I always thought was a hoodlum. His name was Roger Jones. He was a little bit older than me, I think. And one of the dilemmas I've had in remembering this particular senior moment is exactly how old I was when this happened. But I'm thinking I was in about the 2nd grade, maybe the 3rd grade. I'm not positive. Don't hold a gun to my head, but that's about where I think I was in all of this. And Roger, he was a guy that rode bikes with us, and there was another guy that lived across the street from my grandmother. He had an older brother, but the guy I'm talking about, his name was Ray Fancher. And ironically enough, Ray lives right up the street from me now, about, 200 yards. But Ray was a little older. He was probably about 6 years older than me, and so he had a totally different little fan club that he hung out with. And I remember they had a basketball goal in the empty lot next to their house, and they were always out there shooting hoops. And us younger guys were never really part of that bunch. Now, right up the street, there was a duplex house, and I always thought duplex houses were kind of cool. They were joined together with, this is before I ever stayed in a hotel that had adjoining rooms. So the notion of one house having 2 different families in it was really kind of strange and wonderful and maybe unique in a way because I guess you could hear your neighbors really, really good when there was a wooden door that separated the two of you. But these 2 families were actually related to one another. There were the Xanthos family, and then there were the Garzricks. And Carolyn Garzrick, who was my age, she actually went to the same elementary school, the the parochial school. We were both at St. Anthony's in Inslee, and but even in kindergarten, Carolyn, she was redheaded, which I've never really. Well, let's just put it this way. I've always thought redheads were a little unique, and seemed like most of the ones I knew were kind of mean. But that's not to say that Carolyn was, but she was extremely smart. In fact, I can remember the day she showed up in, it would have to be probably first grade. First day of school, the teacher, who was a nun at St. Anthony's, asked us if anyone knew their ABCs. And, a bunch of us guys were going, what was the question? And anyway, Carolyn raised her hand, jumped up to the front of the room, and proceeded to sing her ABCs. You know the little song, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and she did it perfectly. She knew where all the vowels and the consonants were located. And believe it or not, we were all in awe, because I don't even remember, well, I was in kindergarten, but I don't ever remember learning anything about an alphabet. I didn't know how to write at that point in time, so it really wasn't necessary to know it. I could speak, somewhat, but nevertheless, she had a perfect grasp of the ABCs. And it kind of ticked me off, because I thought she was showing off, but turns out she was just smart, But she had an older brother. He was 2 years older than me, and his name was Bobby. And Bobby Garzik and I, we hung out a lot. We were probably the only two kids on the block that were of similar age, two similar guys, that is. And so we rode bikes a lot all over Fairfield and up and down the streets and sidewalks of that town. And we did a lot of things together, including some, I guess, adventures that I just want to share a little bit about with you today. We used to play in his backyard a lot. And I was going to show you a picture. There was a picture of Carolyn's little baby bed. Now it didn't look quite this good laying around in the backyard. It was a little muddy. All the cushions were gone and the little canopy was missing, but you still had this little bassinet type baby bed there on the ground. And so Bobby and I, we would catch roly-polies and put them in that baby bed, and we would shake them up. And if you know anything about a roly-poly, I don't know if kids even know that they exist today, but they're these little hard-shell critters, and when you aggravate them, they just roll up into little balls, and you can flick them and they'll roll around. It's kind of like playing marbles with live animals, although, well, insects. And so we would play around in the bassinet with the roly-polies, getting them to race and roll them around. And then Bobby, one day, and somewhat to my dismay as well, got some of his mom's straight pins. And so he would start punching them with the straight pins, and when they opened up, he would just poke them and just pin them down to the bottom of the bed. The bed had a wooden, piece of wood in the bottom of it. And so this little arena kind of became like the Coliseum in a lot of ways. I mean, it was like, does this one die or does he live? I got that backwards. Does he die or does he live? And so that's, we spent a lot of time persecuting roly-polies back in the summer when they were out. And, I'm not sure, God's probably counts that as a sin more I think about it, but nevertheless, that was kind of the game of the week, or the game of the summer, that we were playing with the roly-polies. Now, one of the other things that happened is we would go to a theater there in Birmingham, or in Fairfield rather. It was called the Fairfield Theater. And in that theater, there were a number of opportunities for us to see, the current movies. There was a lot of Tarzan movies. There was a lot of cowboy movies, with Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. And as we progressed through the summer, there would always be those kind of B-grade horror movies. And the one that really caught our eye and the one we went to was called The Deadly Mantis. This was the movie poster that was used to promote that movie. By the way, if you have a comment, if you're on live with us at either Facebook or YouTube, we're going out on both channels this evening. Feel free to leave a comment. But anyway, the Deadly Mantis movie was about a giant praying mantis. In fact, I'll take the liberty of showing you the trailer for that movie. I hope I don't get a copyright strike on this, but here we go. You can kind of get a feel for what we were watching that summer. Wow. And there he is. Now you got to remember, we were 8, Bobby's maybe 10.
Where are they? Where are the bodies?
We're sitting in the...
In all the kingdom of the living, there is no more deadly or voracious creature than the praying mantis.
There's no more deadly creature in all of humanity and the animals put together
Think you'll be able to drive it out
than
to
the
sea?
praying mantis.
Every device of military science, every defensive weapon, radar, planes, rockets, marshaled to destroy 1,000 tons of beastly fury. A monster
Great
leaving a trail
special
of
effects,
carnage,
huh?
spreading panic across a
And
continent.
there's always a woman. Surprised she wasn't in the shower, but you get the point.
Button. Yes, sir.
Nothing in its path
There
was
he
safe.
goes.
Not the planes in the sky, not the ships at sea,
Not me.
nor the vehicles on the ground.
You boys might just as well go back. There aren't any bodies.
She got paid to
And then
scream.
this most dangerous monster that ever lived challenged the security of our cities.
Yeah, well, you get the point. You get the point. Anyway, the Deadly Mantis, that was our idea behind, what we should be looking out for, of course. And, the problem is when you've been fooling around with roly-polies, and next thing you know, it enters your mind, what would we do? Well, let me back up a half a step. We went home from that movie, and we got to thinking about it. And Bobby remembered catching a praying mantis and putting it in a coffee can, an old, used coffee can that his mom used for buttons and bows and stuff like that, just a storage thing on their back porch. And so he put it in the can. Now, what I didn't know was how long before we saw that movie did he catch that praying mantis. But being older guy and maybe taking a little advantage of the younger guy here. I don't say I was smaller, but I was younger. I was a little nervous because he started talking about opening that can. And of course, my first thought was, if you open that can, that praying mantis is going to expand into something life-size and bigger than a building, kind of like the one we just saw in the movie a while ago. And so, and I think Bobby maybe even talked himself into the idea that, well, that could happen. That could happen. Well, I guess the heart of this whole memory is the fact that we were really we were really scared, but we also felt guilty because we had been persecuting those roly-polies. And being good little Catholics, we knew all about guilt. And so, this was one of those things where we were going to have to go see the priest about. But more importantly, and maybe more imminently, we've got to figure out if that praying mantis in that can was going to come out and grow into the size of a house and eat both of us as punishment for, well, whipping his brother in the arena of Carolyn Gartrick's bassinet. So anyway, I would like to tell you that we put on our big boy pants and we opened that can, but that didn't happen. And we both chickened out. And so he put the can back on the shelf, and I think it even had a little piece of tape on it that said praying mantis that he had labeled when he first caught it and put it in there, and just forgot about it is what happened. He just forgot it was in there until we saw that movie. And well, in order to get some closure on all this, we could have been brave. We could have opened that can, but we didn't. But I did find out later, and I'm not talking about days later, I'm talking about years later. I was asking Bobby about it, and I said, Bobby, did you ever open that can with the praying mantis in it? You remember that movie we saw? And he remembered all of it. And he said, yeah, my mom opened it. She said it looked like an old dead French fry, and so she threw it out. Now, that's the difference between kids and that mama from the Mediterranean culture. She was half Greek and half Italian, I think, and so she just took the bull by the horns and grabbed that praying mantis. Well, it was no longer alive, and so that was the end of the story. And I guess in some ways it's the end of the senior moment. It's funny what you realize as kids that matter to you a lot, and maybe even set some standards and some values for you. I'm not sure if this one did, but we were just kids being kids and growing up in a little town called Fairfield. And I got to tell you, there are a lot more memories I can share with you, and will be doing so in the future. I hope you'll come back and join me on Sunday afternoon at 5. We're live at 5 with Senior Moments. We hope you have a great week. Have a great Memorial Day tomorrow, and remember those and the reason why we celebrate this day and the remembrances of those who gave their lives for our freedom. We appreciate you watching, and hope you will. Before I leave, let me make a little hello here to my buddy Bentley Burns in Tupelo, Mississippi. Hey, Bentley, it's awful good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Bentley's probably about 27 or 28 years old, so he probably has no clue about anything that I've talked about this afternoon. But Bentley is a wonderful magician from Tupelo, a good friend of mine in the magic community. In fact, he and I will be appearing this coming Friday night, that's May the 30th, at what's known as the Acta Theater. That's the community theater in Trussville, Alabama. And good tickets are still available There's actually 5 magicians. It's like 5 guys, fries and hamburger, but 5 guys on stage, not at the same time, and doing our thing. And we've done it about 3 times. It's a wonderful show. Think about it. You can get tickets online. It's ACTA. I'm doing this spontaneously. I haven't planned to plug this show, but since we're here, Bentley, I thought I would, and I hope to see you Friday night. And for those of you who are watching, think about coming and joining us. That's at Acta Theater in Trussville, ACTA. You can Google it and see us. It's called 5 Magicians, and I hope you'll think about that and consider coming. And if you do come, be sure and come up and say hello, not only to Bentley, but to me. And thank you for watching the podcast this evening. It looks like all of the folks that have tuned in from YouTube, from Facebook. So we will call this an evening, and I will see you next week, if not sooner. Take care.